Ladies, gentlemen, and gravitars of all ages, it's time for some raw science. Or I guess some cooked science, because it's time to apply those beautiful radiation waves with ridiculous efficiency to essentially microwave our enemies into a pile of paste on the floor repeatedly. And how do we do it? With jellyfish, of course. This weapon is Katagawa's Revenge, a legendary sniper rifle that works in quite a funky way. The fire mode of it will pop out explosive jellyfish that blow up near where your shot lands, but what we're after is the shock mode of the weapon, which deploys jellyfish around where your bullets hit, which then essentially just shoot out lightning constantly for a number of seconds at nearby enemies before they eventually disappear. This isn't the craziest thing on its own as a weapon, but if you know about neutron capture, the augment for Harlowe's Chroma Accelerator action skill, well, let's just say that putting these two things together is the big main thing that causes the silliness of this build. So let's break down how to get yourself to this level of power where you obliterate everything, even on the hardest difficulty that we currently have in the game. First up then, let's go over the skill tree, and we are of course going to be using Chroma Accelerator as our action skill. This blasts off a big ball that does damage as it passes through enemies, and then again with a large explosion when it either impacts with terrain, or if you re-trigger the action skill manually yourself. Our passive as Harlowe is Entanglement, and this makes it so anytime that you deal action skill damage to an enemy, they will be entangled, and all entangled enemies share a portion of gun and skill damage that you do to them. That also helps us out a fair bit for mobbing. As for the points that we spend, here in the red tree we pick up 5 points in Field Ready Prototype for action skill damage increase. That lets us pick up our augment, which is Neutron Capture. This augment tallies up all of the damage that your action skill does, and then for 8 seconds after it explodes, it adds a portion of that as a flat increase to your gun damage, meaning any source of gun damage is increased by that flat number. It essentially applies as a separate proc of damage that you can see happen whenever you deal gun damage, and so the way to maximize this is actually by hitting as many times as you physically can within that 8-second window. This means the vast majority of our actual damage is actually action skill based, because we are just applying a portion of our action skill damage with our actual gunshots. And I mess with a bunch of different ways of doing this, but this legendary sniper specifically is by far both the most potent and most fun way that I've found. That said, the actual action skill damage increase passive that we had here essentially increases all of our damage because of that interaction. We pick up 5 ranks of Cyclotron as well for increased fire rate. This seems to increase the tick rate of shock damage from the jellyfish that come from the sniper rifle, which makes it proc neutron capture more frequently. So fire rate does still actually affect this build, even though we are doing it with a sniper rifle. We then pick up 5 ranks of elementary for increased element and status damage, and this is pretty much all of our damage. In fact, it's all of our damage twice over, because this is a double dipping bonus for us, because the action skill itself gets boosted by this as it does elemental damage, but then also the flat damage number when applied from neutron capture is also element damage, and because it applies separately, it gets boosted by this again a second time. This unlocks branches, and we'll be going down the middle branch here, starting with 5 points into Poison Sun for increased radiation damage and a radiation chance. The vast majority of our damage in this build is radiation, so this just gives us increased damage very simply. We then also take 4 points into Glow Up. This gives us just a base crit hit chance with guns against irradiated enemies. This does not affect our actual action skill, but it does give us a lot of ability to crit, which helps propagate and spread our damage around the place more than anything else. And it's worth noting that we do use the Jakobs crit knife modifier with the guaranteed crits on it for actual bossing, but this helps a lot for mobbing, and this would also help if they do eventually happen to nerf the crit knife modifier. That said, after this we also take 3 points into Chain Reactor. This makes Harlowe deal bonus radiation damage to entangled enemies. Nearly everything that you're fighting for more than half a second will get entangled because of the way this works, so this just is a bunch of bonus damage as radiation just in general. We then also take 1 point into Dirty Bomb. This makes it so anytime you apply a radiation to an enemy, you create a radiation explosion on that enemy for a portion of the total irradiated damage status. We will apply irradiation constantly because we are doing radiation damage constantly, and this just echoes a portion of our overall radiation damage a second time. Basically, it repeats it. Then we also have the Demon Core Capstone, which I should mention here. This makes our unstable energy pocket fire at a bunch of extra sort of radiation darts as it's traveling, and what's important is that every one of these little darts counts as skill damage. It counts as part of the skill's damage. It all adds up to give more damage to the eventual neutron capture conversion. As well, it makes any of the entanglements that happen during the action skill active part automatically irradiate enemies, which also then triggers Dirty Bomb. Then we also are going to be taking exactly 3 points into Carry the One. You could take more than this if you want. This makes it so anytime you entangle an enemy, you have a chance to entangle a second enemy. 3 points in this feels like the sweet spot for me from playing with it for a long time, but this pretty much only matters for mobbing, and our mobbing is more than good enough where you don't really need to have it be that much better. You could have more points in here, but I prefer having more points elsewhere, like the fact that it lets us put 1 more point into Glow Up for the extra base crit chance. After that, we are going on to our blue skill tree for the day, 5 points into Make Extraordinary for crit chance with skills. This increases any time that you entangle an enemy, and this is part of what lets us be just such a menace even outside of bosses, as we are constantly using our action skill, constantly entangling enemies, and that makes us have a high crit chance on follow-up uses of Chroma Accelerator, which then further boosts the damage from neutron capture, and it all just links together very nicely and cleanly. We've got 5 points into Periodic Table Flip right here for, again, increased element damage, status chance, and cryo effectiveness. We mostly take this for the elemental damage, as again that is a double dipping bonus for neutron capture, and the way that the damage works for that augment. We grab 1 rank of Ripple Effect. This is a kill skill where whenever you kill an entangled enemy, it automatically entangles one other nearby enemy. This stacks with the passive we took in the red tree that gives us a chance to entangle multiple enemies when we entangle an enemy, so when you kill an enemy that's entangled, they can entangle 2 enemies. Essentially, it's like a pyramid scheme of danger. We take 4 points in Bright Future for increased fire rate after triggering or re-triggering an action skill, because we do that frequently, and again, the fire rate does actually help us out a fair amount. We then also are going to be having 4 bonus points in this from my class mod, which is quite solid. You don't need to have them, but it is the ideal choice of bonus ranks on the class mod we've got. Then finally, we put 3 points into Keep Ice on that right here, which gives us lifesteal with cryo damage, but importantly, gives us overshield gain from the lifesteal if we have full health when this happens. This is one of our sources of survivability. It is what you need to survive properly and to activate some of our effects until you get a specific modifier that I will go over in the gear section. That said, that does it for our skill points, but we've also got our specialization points to spend too. 10 points, your first 10 points want to go into Sharpshooter to let us grab In the Zone. This gives us increased gun damage and crit damage while we are aiming down sights, stacking the longer that you aim for. And because of a different thing we'll be taking later on, you can actually increase your action skill damage by aiming down sights for 5 seconds before you throw out your action skill, which then increases the damage of neutron capture and our damage as a whole. We want to put 10 points into Runner, mostly just for the sake of unlocking Daredevil, which is the action skill related section of the tree. We put 20 points into here to unlock the full list of passives. We want I Am a Gun for 50% of gun damage bonuses applied to action skill damage. This means that any sources of gun damage give you increased action skill damage, which means that it scales our neutron capture even harder. We also take a Honed Mind for 5% base crit chance on action skills in general, as well as 50% bonus action skill crit damage. Then you put your next 20 points directly into the Brute passive, the gun damage node, so that we can take Riddle You This as our final actually equipped passive. This is a stacking gun damage buff. Anytime you deal gun damage, we stack this extremely rapidly, and with action skills scaling with a portion of our gun damage, this is a pretty solid boost to our overall output. Any points past this, I would stick into Killer for the straight up crit damage and status damage increased passive, as we do both of those things in copious amounts. After that, let's talk about our equipment, starting with guns. The big main one that you'll see me using pretty much all the time, and the big thing that I recommend, is Katagawa's Revenge. This is a seriously underrated legendary sniper rifle. The main effect, Stormcloud, is the reason it's so perfect within our setup. In Incendiary mode, the shots launch off explosive jellyfish, which are fine, but shock mode is where it is at. The shock shots will deploy a few jellyfish right beside where the hit connects, and each jellyfish will automatically apply very frequent ticks of shock damage to the closest enemy. These ticks count as gun damage, and so every time that a jellyfish does damage, that applies the neutron capture flat damage bonus that we store up when we use our action skill. You can also have this weapon roll with Jakobs ricochets on crits like I have here, which then just makes it even sillier for mobbing, especially because you can ricochet the shots around. And this weapon is just one size fits all for the build. It is pretty much the perfect thing both for mobbing and for bossing for your single target. You can just go pure high fire rate guns as well if you want instead. There are plenty of options that fit that bill and do work well in the setup as a result, but the sniper rifle specifically is by far the most comfortable and frankly the most fun combination for this build that I've messed around with. As for how to get the legendary sniper rifle, it is a dedicated drop from Driller Hole. This is the boss located right here on your map, only available after you've completed his related story mission within the region. For your rep kit, you could technically use pretty much anything. We don't need the rep kit effect that I have to make this do what it does, and I only even use this when preparing for the biggest bosses in the game on Ultimate Vault Hunter Mode 5. But I've got Warpaint here. This is a legendary rep kit that gives you 30% bonus fire rate and movement speed after you use it, and despite its long cooldown, it regens super quickly because it lowers its own cooldown by 2 seconds anytime that you take damage. As well, I've got the Enrage modifier on this, which is perfect for boss bursting, as this is an effect that applies to all damage that we do, boosting it. This means that for us, it double dips because it boosts Chroma Accelerator to begin with, but then also applies the boost a second time to the actual neutron capture flat damage bonuses when they hit the enemy. As for how to get this one for yourself, it is a dedicated drop from the bosses of this drill site over here at the edge of the region between Terminus Range and the Fade Fields. For your Ordinance, this is going to line up with most other builds, honestly, which is the ideal option, being a Jakobs throwing knife with the Penetrator Augment modifier. This gives you guaranteed crits for 5 seconds after your knife hits an enemy, and damage and payload is the second best modifier to add on to if you can. This level of item literally does not matter. I've been using a level 28 version of this for a long time. The modifiers are the only things you care about, and those don't change based on the level. That said, we have some natural crit chance as well, so this isn't a requirement to make the build function, it just really makes the build blast off for big boss burst moments. If you don't want to use this, or if it gets nerfed at some point, because I do keep seeing people say that this is going to happen sooner rather than later, you can actually instead use this slot for one of the big Gatling gun ordinances. These have insane fire rates, and they count for applying neutron capture damage, so they are a fun just sort of extra method of burst damage through neutron capture when the Gatling gun is available. For your class mod, this is a funky slot for this build setup because we're using a legendary class mod, the Skeptic class mod, but we are entirely using it for the last sentence of the legendary effect, which is shooting enemies that have an active status effect, restores 5% of your action skill cooldown. We have an immense fire rate. Every tick of the jellyfish counts as a bullet hitting the enemy, and we apply status effects pretty much guaranteed when we are using our setup too. Even outside of neutron capture windows, we're just applying loads of shock constantly. This means you can get your action skill off cooldown in the blink of an eye, and so you are never more than a couple of seconds away from having neutron capture available to you again, which is a big deal for making this properly consistent. Otherwise, the cooldown does prove to be a bit of an issue. The actual passives on this aren't the most important, but the best one to aim for is the one that I have 4 points in here. This is the fire rate increase after using your action skill, and the best stat modifier that you can roll on this in the blue slot is elemental damage for the double dipping effect once again, but action skill damage is quite solid too, as is crit damage, which I have here. This mod is a dedicated drop from Queen Callus, the main story boss of Carcadia Burns. Next up, we've got our shield, and this is one that you'll probably be seeing around the place a lot, as it is great for a lot of different builds, and it's Super Soldier. The legendary effect on this gives you 25% fire rate and movement speed increase when your shield is full, as well as regenerating 1 ammo per second. We keep our shields full constantly by generating loads of overshield through our cryo damage lifesteal passive, but also through the modifier on the shield too. This keeps the buffs active from this shield consistently, and even if nothing else, don't scoff at that 1 ammo regen per second. Our main weapon in this is a sniper rifle, and we fire it relatively quickly. So without this item, it can be really easy to run out of ammo when you're just sort of mobbing through larger packs of enemies between breaks, but the shield really fixes that up completely. As for the modifiers, the ideal one is Siphon, which is a chance for 1500 overshield whenever you deal damage, and this is our real big constant source of overshield gain. The passive helps a little bit, but this modifier, with the rate at which we are applying damage to enemies, makes it honestly pretty difficult to die if you're actually shooting at things. So a Super Soldier shield with Siphon is pretty much perfect, but you also have one more modifier it could roll with to make it even better, mine being health regen when energy shields are full, which is just a nice little bit of bonus survivability. To get this one for yourself, you will have to farm Vile Lictor, the main story boss of the Terminus Range region, as it is one of his dedicated drops. Finally, then we have our enhancement slot, and there's a few things that you can do with this, but it's not the most impactful to our setup of all the other parts. The main thing that you're after from this is gun critical damage as a stat in the listed modifiers, as this does boost our general damage output. I've got it on a Jakobs sequencer enhancement as well. This makes consecutive critical hits give you increased critical hit damage, and so while this won't apply in most scenarios, it does specifically apply when we use the crit knife on a boss and instantly pile this up to the full buff in a quarter of a second due to having the Jakobs modifier on our sniper too. And then to follow that up, let's go over our firmware, which are the set bonuses on our gear. It does not matter which slot has which one, so long as you have the same firmware I have in general, which are going to be 3 ranks of bullets to spare. This gives us increased fire rate at tier 1, increased magazine size at tier 2, and fire rate increased by 50% of your magazine size for tier 3. This may seem a bit odd with the specific weapon that we're using, but again, all of those 3 buffs do actually increase our damage more than any other firmware that I have messed with, and I tried quite a few. Even Deadeye I ended up doing less than this did, and again, I believe that's because of the tick rate of the shock procs actually seeming to scale from fire rate. Aside from that, we take 2 ranks of Goo JFC. First rank is action skill cooldown rate, which is essentially irrelevant because of our class mod and how that works. Second rank is 15% increased action skill damage, which then boosts our neutron capture damage buff as a result too. As far as actually playing the build then, for mobbing it's more or less as simple as just use your action skill, make sure it hits at least 1 enemy, especially with the actual full explosion as that is the bulk of the damage, then just fire your sniper rifle vaguely near enemies. Don't fire off too many shots, it won't take more than like 1 or 2 to get rid of like multiple enemies if they're near each other, and you don't want to chew through all of your ammo too quickly. The jellyfish will then come out of the ground wherever you hit and damage anything that is near them. So this is one of those fun builds where you barely even have to aim at all to begin with, and you just use your action skill once every 8 seconds or so to keep your damage up high. And if you ever end up with the buff ended but action skill on cooldown, just throw out a couple of sniper shots near an enemy and the cooldown will instantly reset. You can also use your rep kit constantly while you're mobbing for even more bonus damage and stuff like that, but you don't really have to do that even on UVH 5 if the rest of the setup is all set up and working. As for bosses and setting up your proper burst damage phase, it's not that much more complex honestly. The most you really need to do to burst down a boss is throw a crit knife, use your rep kit, throw out the action skill, retrigger the action skill while the boss is in range, then throw out another knife and start shooting at their weak spots. You can increase the damage even further by aiming down sights with the weapon, both before the action skill use and during the actual firing of the weapon to boost it even further, but if you have the gear that I have here, then nothing will even require that full level of setup to burst it down in 1 8-second neutron capture window. That just about does it for today then everyone, your guide to absolutely obliterating the hardest difficulty in the game and the hardest content that we currently have available by using Harlowe and some fun little jellyfish friends. I hope you've all enjoyed this, and I hope you enjoy using this for yourself too if you try it out in game. Like if you liked the video, subscribe to the notification bell for more, and most importantly, ladies and gentlemen, until next time, I'm the conductor of the poop train!
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.